This is Perth's Elite Personal Trainers Podcast. Your host, Danny Marina, talks to some of Perth's best and most successful personal trainers in the city.
Hello and welcome to Perth Elite Personal Trainers Podcast. I'm your host, Danny Marina. Today's guest is a strength and performance coach. He runs his business V Athletic Strength and Performance out of Fremantle. There he trains his state and national athletes from various backgrounds. It's a pleasure and a warm welcome to strength coach and good guy in the fitness industry, Johnny Vincenti. Hello, Johnny.
Hello, Dan. Good to see you, mate. We've known each other for a while, mate, so it's a pleasure to be here. Follow all your stuff, so great to be on your show.
Yeah, thanks very much, Johnny. Hey, listen, what's going down in your neck of the woods? How's everything going with your training? Because we haven't spoken for a long time. Give me sort of like a bit of a rundown with what's going on with all your athletes and your clients.
Yeah, really good, mate. Everything's going great. Obviously, I've been based out of Warehouse Fitness Centre down in South Fremantle for forever now, so I've been a part of furniture down there. But yeah, particularly, I'd say over the last 5 or 6 years, I've really looked at getting more into elite athlete performance. So I went back to school, did a little bit more that way as well, and it's been a really good business. I've got a lot of beach volleyballers that are pretty well involved in that. Also helped assistant coach a weightlifting team up at ECU with Greg and Aaron Haff. So that's, it's amazing. That actually really helps just fast track your learning considerably. And then I've got a lot of athletes from a lot of different sporting backgrounds. So it's been a real pleasure. It's actually great working with them.
Yeah, it's from my sort of standpoint as well. It's just great how, you sort of gone from personal trainer and you've made this sort of progression or this sort of change over the years and to more sort of performance-based sort of training. And, I've sort of from a distance watched your, sort of progress. And mate, it's just awesome to see.
Oh, look, I really appreciate it, Dan. I think in this industry, I've been involved in it for about 20 years now, and I think you work your best when you're the most passionate about something. And I've been, fortunate to be involved in a lot of sporting backgrounds growing up. It was AFL, there was a lot of beach volleyball and some other things. So when you really take on those sports and you're training the people and feel like you're putting something back into the sport, I think it's a lot of self-gratification. So it's fantastic to work with them.
Yeah, awesome. Hey, Johnny, listen, how do you identify which sort of motor qualities are required for specific sort of sports?
Well, mate, I reckon like anything in this industry, I think the answer is, and you've probably heard this before, it depends. And it depends on so many factors. And that can come down to the sport itself, the athlete, and the training age of the athlete, the phase of the training. There's so many aspects that go into it. It's kind of hard to just pick one. But one thing that I will say, I like to break it down and have a look at what do the sports truly involve. And I don't mean just breaking it down into individual movements. What is the nature of the sport? So if we take beach volleyball, for example, which I do get to work in, it's a repeat power sport. There is just repeat power everywhere, and that's what all the efforts are. There's no contact in it either, which can make a bit of a difference. However, they're diving around all over the place and manipulating their bodies in all sorts of different ways, which I can't do anymore. I'm getting too old for that. But if you compare that to something like AFL or possibly rugby, they are really elite running sports these days. And with those, there's collision as well. So we have to take those things into consideration. So they're the things I really look at. What does the sport truly make up? Okay, so what truly makes the sport what it is? Then we can go. Then we can actually go and watch a lot of sports, check out what's going on, have a look at the different movements, and then go from there. I'm really fortunate I get to work with some physios as well. So they'll often give me a really good screening process of some, for instance, a beach volleyball athlete. We can then see, if there's any limitations, check their different patterns, if, you know, they can hinge well, if they can squat well, if they can move well. And once we've got that, and once we've got those things, then we can actually look at putting a program together for them. But I think it's really important to get away too much from just looking at just specific movements and having a look at what makes the sport up as a whole.
Yeah, mate, I love that. And I love how you started that off too. It depends.
Yeah, always depends.
Always, man.
Everything in this industry, I think.
Yeah, and listen, and once you sort of identify that, what type of training do you use to develop these motor qualities?
Sure. Well, as I say, and we will go back to, you know, when I say it depends, that'll come out quite a bit, but there's always going to be individual differences. I think we'll understand there's always going to be individuals. I've got some that are absolute freaks of nature and are just really high power athletes, and that's just the way they're born. You know, they've got different muscle fiber type, and it's great to see. It really is pretty impressive in there. But in the gym, I like to look at strength as your base for all elements. If you can get somebody strong, then you can build a really solid foundation. And then you can, like I said, you can build your speed qualities from that, and you can build everything else that goes into it, your movement. And of course, the big one in sports is driving force development. So you really want to make sure that they can, you know, apply force in the right way. So I think that's a really, really, you know, important one. There's a great little article I saw the other day, and they were talking about how agility runners, for instance, and doing a lot of little fancy footwork isn't that great for rugby, because they were saying that that's not actually the way you move when you go for a big cut or something like that. That comes down to being able to apply that force in the right way. So I think that if we can get the athlete as strong as possible, it gives them the best chance for, you know, improved rate of force development.
Yeah.
How do you find the same sort of thing with you guys, or do you have athletes that do that sort of thing as well? That you find that?
Well, you know, one thing that sort of keeps on coming up is you can never be too strong.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean? And I've never sort of come across anyone that you know, has come to me in sort of the 20 years that I've been training people and says, you know, listen, I've got a problem. I'm too strong. You know?
I can't agree more.
So
So,
so respect to that. I mean, I think if you get sort of someone as strong as you possibly can, then that's a great quality to have. And then sort of like, you know, most things sort of like just, you know, come off that real strength base.
absolutely. And I think there's a great picture somewhere where it's got a bunch of different coloured cogs, and it's got strength as the main cog, and then all the other cogs around it, which are movement, speed. It's got all those, and that's the little cog that moves them all. I think it's really, really important that if we can get strong.
Yeah. So I guess, Johnny, strength is the core, the foundation, where everything sort of like you know, comes off that sort of quality.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And Johnny, what's the typical sort of progression and time frame you have with your athletes?
Well, look, Dan, being involved in several sports, there's not always one set time frame. So I'm very big on periodising a lot of my training, but I'm also involved in, you know, with team sports. Let's take something like football or rugby, where in season you're playing every single week, and that has to be taken in. Volleyball, for instance, you might have an event 1 week, then you might have 3 weeks off, then another event, and then another 2 weeks off, and then 3 events in a row. And so it's a little bit more static, but there might be some extra time in between that. And then also things like weightlifting, where you may only be peaking and tapering for maybe, you know, anywhere from 2 to 4 events through the year. So there's a very big difference in progression there as far as what happens in your competitive seasons. But I think the big point is having a look at when you do get that down track, and I'm just having a look at, I've got a volleyball periodisation chart here, which unfortunately you guys can't see, but we have a look at the volleyball, roughly goes from about October to March, the season. And with my girls this time around, I had about 12 weeks in the pre-season or the preparatory phase before that. And that's a very, very important time, obviously. So I think that's the big thing. We have to look at what the sport is, where we actually set it up, and then we can have a look at our prep phases and, you know, our competition phases, and go from there. But if you can get a good amount of work in that preparatory phase, it sets you up for having a really good season.
Yeah. Johnny, while we're there, can we just expand a little bit more on periodization? Because,
Sure.
the word itself is a bit of a, it's used in more so in sort of like the strength and the conditioning field, not so much in personal training, but however, in personal training, periodization is occurring whether you sort of know it or not. But usually probably, in your experience as well, in personal training, it's more so, it's not as structural, it's not as systemized as it is when you're sort of training with athletes, because you've got that sort of that time frame and you've got that real sort of goal that you're trying to achieve. Can you just expand on periodization and how that would actually benefit personal trainers if they were to actually apply that sort of model?
Well, I think that, you're really looking at, you've got planning and you've got periodization. So I think, the planning aspect really, comes to play, I think, for personal trainers, because, again, it depends on what the goals are. And I think that's one of the biggest things. We have to set the goal. Now, no matter if you're playing a sport and you have a set goal for, a set, competition phase or something like that, or you're a personal trainer and your athlete or your client simply wants to get a bit leaner, just get a bit fitter so they can play with their kids, there's got to be a set goal. So if we can understand that set goal, then we can plan around it. Where has this person come from? It might be something as simple as they've come from a zero training background. So the first thing we have to do is build a little bit of a foundation for these guys. Once we do that, then we can actually look at planning the next step and the next step. And that might depend on multiple factors. So things can change as we go, as it always does. But I think that it allows us to actually have a look at goals and have a look at things in a structured way across the board. So I think it can benefit anyone from, like I say, just clients for personal training or your elite athletes, where it does obviously come into importance.
Yeah, good point, buddy. Hey, listen, when I guess the thing that ties this all into play also, and it'd be a massive thing regarding especially the strength and performance field with athletes, is what are the sort of motivational strategies that you put in place, to ensure that your athletes, their success is sort of improved and are sort of compliant?
It's probably a little bit different. Sometimes when you, just going back to your personal training question, sometimes if they do come in and they're a bit like, I just kind of want to do this, want to get a bit fitter, that becomes a little bit more difficult. It's like, okay, we've got to find your first goal. But with a lot of athletes, a lot of them are pretty compliant because they're fairly self-motivated because they want to get results. So they come and see you, obviously, when they go, right, I want to improve, I'm doing pretty well, but I really want to improve and make sure I'm, got everything under control. They're fairly well self-motivated. So I usually don't have too much of a problem with them wanting to come in because they're doing it for a purpose and they really want to improve that. But I think the big thing is that you've got to have quality preparation. So you need to get to a point where you almost plan things out. Let's say we're talking periodization, and spell it out for them. If we can spell it out for them and say, guys, this is what we're going to do, then it comes down to communication. Communication is huge in this field. If you can communicate with your athletes, clients, etc., you're going to get a lot more success and you're going to get a lot more out of them. So if we're talking about periodization chart, for instance, I want to go through with my athletes. Some will just say, yeah, don't worry, that sounds good. Others go, wow, that's really interesting, and they want to know what's going on. And I think it's really important to let them know what's going on there.
Yeah.
You get what we call, I love the analogy, we get what we call warriors and princesses. So you get the warriors and you tell them to do something and they'll do it for you full on 100%, full bore. And then you get the princesses, every time you do something, it's like, oh, I can't do this. And trust me, there's a lot of guys that are princesses too. So it's, a lot of girls are warriors. You truthfully probably want something in between that, because the warriors can work so hard that they break themselves, and the princesses aren't working hard enough. So, you know, you need to educate them on why we're having heavier weeks, why we're possibly having deload weeks, things like that. So I think that, you know, it's important to understand that and communicate. But in the athletic field, I think that results can often dictate the motivation levels as well. So if they're getting results, they're motivated. If they're not, then you have to sit down with them. Why aren't we doing? Is there something at home? Is there something in our training? And, you know, just have that really good talk to them and see what's going on.
Yeah, mate, I love that. I suppose there's a time and a place also, you know, when, you know, you use that description sort of, and I love it, the warriors and princesses. I suppose, you know, being a warrior, it would sort of like benefit when you're in that, so that real progression sort of stage. And when you're deloading, you're going into mode.
Mate, they hate the deload weeks. They hate them, but sometimes they feel worse in the deload weeks because their fatigue levels are so high and they can't make head or tail of what's going on. Yeah. And I'm like, that's where I have to say, just leave that bit to me. You know, but they just want to run through a brick wall for you. They're hilarious, but they're good athletes to have as well.
Yeah. Hey, on that note, what's the, you know, because in the personal training sort of industry, for as long as I've been involved, we sort of tend to love when you come across those sort of like those real fire sign warrior sort of clients, but they also have their negatives as well. And I guess a lot of times, in my experience, training these warriors, it's really hard to get them to back off the pedal in those, you know, those planned sort of deloading stages and those planned sort of stages of regression. Do you have anything specific that you do with these warriors to, you know, to encourage them to take the actual foot off the pedal?
It's a really tough one. You actually, because the problem is, of course, you can say, right, we're going to back off and plan it, and they're just sitting there going, I don't know about this, and go and do a bit without you knowing. They might go and do a run around the block or whatever without you knowing. So I think, again, it's a really tough one. It's communication is the key. You've got to communicate why we're doing this. If you do this, your performance will be better. And if their performance is better, then they trust you. And once they start trusting you, then I find you can pretty much tell them anything and they'll do it for you. But it's once they realise you kind of know what you're talking about, but it sometimes takes a bit of time to get there. Definitely.
And yeah. What's your go-to sort of resources for information, and what sort of, or who do you go to for information and knowledge? Because, you know, it's very clear to me that you're sort of really sort of knowledgeable in this field. Who do you go to get all these knowledge bombs from?
Well, to be honest with you, Dan, I think one of the big things in this, if I was going to say to anyone, any upcoming strength coach, anyone at all, read. I've been in the industry for 20 years. You've been in it a long time as well. You can never know enough. You can never add enough tools to your coaching toolbox. So the bottom line is absolutely keep reading and reading and reading. I like a lot of different things. Again, as I say, I'm very fortunate to be up at ECU with Greg Haff, who's amazing, and he's written some fantastic books on periodization. He's basically the periodization master. So if that's your key or you want to learn a little bit more about that, I'd suggest not going any further than Greg. There's some great books and there's some fantastic trainers out there as well. And across the board, I've had a bit to do with Jason Weber from Fremantle. He's at Fremantle Dockers. He was with the Wallabies. Love Jason's philosophies. He's got some terrific stuff. If you look online, you'll find some great stuff from guys like probably Eric Cressy is really good. Like I say, there's a lot of guys like Charles Poliquin and things like that. Had some really good things back in the day. A little bit guru-ish these days, but there's definitely some really good quality that you can take out of some of his articles as well. But across the board, there's just so many to choose from, and I think that you've got to read, and I think that you've got to keep questioning yourself. So no matter what you read, ask does that sound right? Are you just taking it because it's written, or are you taking it on because it makes sense? It's got to make sense to you to be able to read it. So go and read lots of articles. Go and read the ACA journals. Dan Baker, the president's got some fantastic articles on and had some huge, with the Brisbane Broncos for 25 years. So there's a lot of different things, but I always encourage the guys, ask yourself questions yourself. When you're reading an article, does it make sense? Is it just a gimmick? Is it just a fluff? Are they trying to sell something, or is it genuine information? And that's where I think it's really important that you can decipher.
Hey, Johnny, this podcast, mate, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on, and I've taken on a heap of sort of new knowledge bombs myself, and I know a lot of the viewers will be really appreciative of the information that you shared with us today. So thanks for coming on the PEPT today, and carry on the good work, mate, and I wish you all the best.
Mate, as I say, I really want to say thank you to you, mate. It's been great to see you. Unfortunately, on just a Skype, I really got to catch up with you in the flesh one of these days. But look, to be asked to be on here, mate, and to talk to you about these things, I hold you in really high regard, obviously. So to be on here has been an absolute pleasure. And, I always, if anyone is on here and has any questions, by all means, just look me up, and I'm more than happy to sit down and have a chat to you.